He had always known that life would be a challenge. Being a single father was never easy, and raising a child who needed extra care made it feel like climbing a mountain every single day. The mornings were the hardest. He would wake before dawn, make breakfast that often ended up half-eaten, and then carefully help his son get ready for the day. The boy had a gentle soul, but his world worked differently than most children. Sounds, lights, even the smallest change could make him anxious. He would sometimes cover his ears, rock back and forth, or retreat to a quiet corner. It was not that he didn't want to communicate. It was just that the world often felt overwhelming, ever since he noticed his son's differences. He had tried everything he could think of to help him. Books, online videos, therapy sessions, even spending countless hours observing him to understand what would calm him down or make him smile. But progress was slow, and the exhaustion sometimes made him feel like he was failing. Work demanded long hours, and there were days when he barely had the strength to function. Yet nothing could make him give up on his son. One day, the center where his son went for early learning introduced a new caregiver. She was quiet, gentle, and observant, almost as if she could see things others could not. The first time he noticed her, she was kneeling beside his son, patiently encouraging him to stack blocks. She spoke softly, never forcing him, but guiding him in a way that seemed natural. Her hands moved slowly, demonstrating each step, and she watched his eyes carefully to see if he understood. It was a small interaction, but it left a big impression. Over the next few weeks, he began to notice changes. Mornings became slightly easier. His son would smile more when he saw her, and the anxiety that had been so heavy began to lift, even if only for moments. She remembered the little details about him, the favorite colors, the songs that calmed him, the toys that made him laugh. It seemed like she had a sixth sense for what he needed. He found himself feeling a relief he hadn't felt in a long time. Someone understood him, understood his son, and cared enough to make every small action meaningful. There were days when he didn't even know what had triggered the tears, but she was there, patient, kind, and calm. Even the smallest victories, like holding a crayon steadily or saying a new word, became celebrations. The bond between her and his son grew quickly. At first, he wondered if it was just luck that she fit so well into their lives. But soon, he realized that she was extraordinary. She didn't just follow instructions. She noticed the things that made his son unique and adapted her approach every single day. She made him feel safe and capable, things that had been rare in his young life. At home, he started to see the difference too. The evenings became more peaceful. His son would hum little tunes he had learned with her, and for the first time, he asked to read the same book over and over again without protest. Those moments of connection were precious, and he held on to them fiercely. He began to trust her completely. There was no fear, no hesitation when he handed his son over in the mornings. He knew she would care for him the way he would if he could be there every minute of every day. The relief was profound. It gave him space to breathe, to focus on work, and to plan for the future without the constant edge of worry. She didn't just care for his son. She cared for him too. On days when he was tired, frustrated, or doubting himself, she offered quiet support. Sometimes it was a simple smile, a nod, or a few words of encouragement. Other times, she would share small observations that helped him see his son in a new light. Her insights were gentle but powerful. It wasn't just about teaching blocks or colors. It was about understanding the heart of the child. She seemed to know it instinctively. He noticed how carefully she communicated with him. Never condescending, never pushing, but always guiding. She asked for his opinions, welcomed his questions, and respected his choices as a parent. That respect meant more than he could put into words. It was rare, and he cherished it. Their relationship grew beyond just caregiver and parent. She became part of their small family ecosystem, a source of strength and understanding. He trusted her not just with his son, but with his worries, his fears, and sometimes his hopes. The little victories at the center became shared victories at home, and the house felt lighter, happier, more alive, as the weeks turned into months. His son made progress that had seemed impossible. Simple tasks became easier, communication improved, and laughter returned in ways that had been rare. Each milestone felt monumental. The small moments, like looking up and smiling when he was proud of himself, were victories they celebrated together. It was no longer just about surviving each day. It was about living it fully, experiencing joy, and finding moments of connection. He began to see her impact not just in the progress, but in the way his son approached life. Confidence grew slowly, like tiny seeds breaking through the soil. Social interactions, once stressful and chaotic, became more manageable. His son began to explore, to try new things, to reach out for help when needed. And through it all, she was there, patient and attentive, guiding and cheering silently. It wasn't just about routines or learning. It was about trust, love, and understanding. She gave him a safe space, a place where mistakes were okay, and curiosity was encouraged. For the first time in years, he felt hope that the world could accommodate his son, that he could thrive despite the challenges. He watched the bond grow and realized how rare it was to find someone who truly understood the heart of a child. Every action, every word, every smile mattered. It was more than a job. It was a calling, and he felt lucky that their paths had crossed. The relief and gratitude he felt were profound. Even the small gestures stayed with him. How she would quietly hum a song to calm his son. How she would gently encourage him to try again when he was frustrated. How she would celebrate his successes no matter how small. These were not things listed in a job description. They were acts of care, of understanding, of humanity, and they made all the difference. He began to share these small victories with friends and family. They would hear about the first time his son used a word correctly, or the first time he hugged someone without fear. These moments, once rare, were becoming frequent. He knew that much of this progress was because of her. The gratitude he felt was overwhelming, and he often found himself thinking about how unfair it would be if she weren't there. The routine of the mornings became something he looked forward to. Seeing his son's face light up, knowing he would be met with patience and understanding, was a comfort he hadn't realized he needed so badly. It made the days easier, the challenges more bearable, and the future seemed brighter. He also started noticing how she treated the other children, quietly adapting to each child's needs. Never losing patience, never showing frustration. It wasn't just her care for his son. It was a universal compassion that touched everyone around her. Watching her interact with others reinforced his belief that she was extraordinary. One afternoon, after a particularly challenging day, he found himself watching her from the doorway, helping his son with a puzzle. Her patience, encouragement, and gentle guidance were remarkable. She never raised her voice, never showed irritation, and always maintained a calm presence. In that moment, he felt a surge of hope. If someone like her could exist in the world, then maybe things would be okay. Maybe his son could thrive. Maybe life could feel a little lighter. He knew, without a doubt, that she had changed their lives. Not just his son's, but his own as well. She had brought patience where there was frustration, understanding where there was confusion, and joy where there was stress. Her presence made the impossible seem possible, the overwhelming seem manageable. As he left the center that day, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had someone he could rely on, someone who saw his son not as a challenge, but as a person full of potential and promise. It was a small relief, but one that made a huge difference. The future felt just a little brighter, and for the first time in a long while, he believed that things might actually turn out okay. Weeks passed, and the bond between the caregiver and the boy grew stronger, making every day feel a little brighter. The father began to notice something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. But just as life seemed to find a rhythm, he received news that shook him to his core. The center had decided to let her go. They called it a routine decision, a matter of following rules and protocol, but he knew the truth. Her dedication, her care, the way she spent extra time with his son IT, was too much for them to handle. They saw it as favoritism, as bending rules, instead of what it really was: love and patience. When he heard the news, he felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. The boy didn't understand what was happening. He sensed the tension, the worry in his father's voice, and the unease in the atmosphere. He clutched his father's hand tightly, looking up with wide, questioning eyes. Explaining that someone he loved and trusted would no longer be there was impossible. The boy didn't respond with words, but his small body stiffened. And the calm that had become part of his routine vanished. The father tried to stay calm for the boy's sake, but the frustration and helplessness bubbled inside him. He had fought for every step of progress, every moment of connection, and now it was at risk. He wanted to argue, to demand that the decision be reconsidered, but he felt powerless. The center insisted it was a final decision, citing policy and procedures. He knew policies mattered, but they had to remember the child. They had to see the difference she had made. At home, the boy reacted in ways that broke his father's heart. He refused to eat breakfast. He refused to go near his toys, and he spent long hours in silence. The father tried to comfort him, to reassure him, but nothing seemed to help. The void left by her absence was more than emotional. It was as if a light had gone out, leaving shadows that grew longer with each passing day. He watched helplessly as his son struggled to adjust, and every setback felt like a personal failure. Meanwhile, he tried to reach out to the center. He called, wrote emails, even requested meetings, all to plead for reconsideration. He spoke about progress, about milestones, about how essential she was to his son's growth. But the response was the same, polite but firm rejection. Policies had to be followed. Special treatment for one child could not be allowed. The words felt cold, almost cruel, especially knowing how much his son had depended on her. He shared the news with close friends and family, hoping for advice or support. Everyone was sympathetic, but few knew how deep the bond had been, or how crucial she had been to his son's well-being. Some suggested trying a new caregiver, but he knew it wouldn't be the same. The boy had learned to trust her, had flourished under her gentle guidance. Starting over with someone new could undo months of progress. Every suggestion felt inadequate, almost dismissive. It made him feel more isolated. Days turned into a week, and the boy's distress continued. Sleep became difficult. Meltdowns more frequent. The father struggled to keep his own emotions in check. Work suffered, energy waned, and the quiet moments at home that had once been comforting now felt heavy with tension. He couldn't shake the feeling that the system had failed his son, that someone who truly cared was being punished for her kindness. It was a bitter reality that gnawed at him day and night. Then began to notice subtle signs of her impact in his son's behavior, even in her absence. The boy would hum the songs she had taught him, or try to complete tasks the way she had shown him. But without her guidance, these moments were fleeting. Frustration quickly returned, and the progress seemed to stall. It was clear that her presence had been more than helpful, it had been transformative. He realized that waiting for the center to change its mind would accomplish nothing. Something had to be done, but he didn't know what. He considered raising his voice, appealing publicly, but he feared retaliation or damaging his son's routine further. The fear of doing the wrong thing paralyzed him, yet doing nothing was equally unbearable. The weight of injustice settled heavily on his shoulders. He thought about all the children at the center, and how one person's commitment could change a life. Her absence wasn't just a personal loss. It was a loss for every child who might benefit from the kind of patience and care she offered. He knew she deserved recognition, but the center refused to see it. Policies and procedures, rules without heart were winning. One afternoon, as he tried to comfort his son after a particularly rough morning, he noticed a small notebook the boy had hidden away. Inside were drawings and scribbles, attempts at communication, attempts at expression. And among them were small notes and symbols that clearly reflected lessons from the caregiver. Seeing this, he realized the depth of the connection. It wasn't just emotional. She had taught him ways to understand and express himself, ways that were now at risk of being lost. The father felt a surge of determination. He couldn't stand by while someone so essential to his son's growth was removed without reason. He began to plan, carefully and quietly, seeking allies and resources. He considered speaking with parents, documenting progress, and gathering support. Every step had to be thoughtful. Every action had to protect his son while standing up for what was right. Meanwhile, the boy's world felt uncertain. He would sometimes ask quietly for the caregiver, pointing to empty spaces or trying to explain with gestures that he didn't fully understand. The father tried to fill the gaps with reassurance, but he knew it wasn't enough. The void she left was tangible, space in his son's routine and heart that could not be replaced easily. Frustration and anger grew within him, but he tempered them with patience. He knew that emotional outbursts would only harm his son further. Instead, he focused on careful observation, documenting every behavior, every regression, and every fleeting success. He needed evidence, not just emotion. He needed to build a case that could not be ignored. In quiet moments, he reflected on the injustice. He thought about the center's perspective, about policies and rules, but he also thought about the essence of caregiving. Rules were important, but compassion, understanding, and dedication were even more vital. He knew that his son's life was more than a set of protocols. It was a story of growth, trust, and love, and he would fight to protect it. The absence of the caregiver became a daily reminder of what was at stake. Every struggle, every setback, every tear from his son fueled his determination. He could not allow bureaucracy to undo the progress that had been made. He began reaching out to other parents, quietly asking about their experiences, hoping to find support. Some understood immediately, sharing stories of their own frustrations, while others were surprised at the depth of the connection that had been lost. Through it all, he never let his son see the full weight of his worry. He smiled when he could, encouraged when he had to, and held him close when words failed. He became a constant, steady presence, even as the world around them seemed unfair and indifferent. The boy needed stability, reassurance, and love, and he provided it as best he could. Each day became a balancing act between managing the boy's emotional state, advocating for the caregiver, and keeping his own life together. It was exhausting, frustrating, and sometimes heartbreaking, but he refused to give up. He knew that the smallest actions mattered, that every attempt to comfort, guide, and protect his son was part of a larger fight. He also began to consider the long-term impact. Without the caregiver, would his son continue to regress? Would the progress they had celebrated together be lost forever? The questions haunted him, and the urgency of action became clear. He could not wait for someone else to see what was obvious to him. He had to act, and he had to act now. Late at night, after the boy had finally fallen asleep, he would sit quietly and plan. He made lists of people to contact, letters to write, and ways to gather evidence of the caregiver's contributions. Each plan was careful, thoughtful, and measured. He could not afford mistakes, but he also could not afford inaction. The stakes were too high. Despite the fear and uncertainty, he found strength in small victories. A brief smile from his son, a moment of calm, a fleeting success in communication each. One reminded him why he was fighting. He was not just advocating for a caregiver. He was protecting his child's world, his child's future, and his child's ability to thrive. And that fight gave him purpose, even in the face of overwhelming obstacles. The days passed slowly, filled with quiet struggle and careful observation. He learned to navigate the delicate balance between protecting his son and challenging an unjust system. Every interaction, every decision was guided by love and determination. He refused to let bureaucracy dictate his son's life, and he refused to accept that someone who truly cared could be dismissed without reason in the moments of stillness. He reflected on the caregiver's impact. Her patience, her insight, her quiet guidance had not only helped his son learn and grow, but had also given him hope, relief, and trust. Losing her was more than inconvenient. It was a profound loss that touched every aspect of their lives. And yet, even in that loss, he found resolve. He would not stop. He would not waver. He would not allow the progress of love and care to be erased. The father's journey had taken a new turn. What began as a daily struggle to support his son had transformed into a fight for justice, fairness, and the recognition of true care. The battle ahead would be difficult, but he knew it was necessary. For his son, for the caregiver, and for the belief that compassion should never be punished, he would stand firm, And in that determination, he found a strength he had never known before. Ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, he felt trapped between helplessness and determination. Every day, he watched his son struggle without the guidance of the caregiver who had been his anchor. Simple routines became battles. Morning breakfasts were interrupted by tears, playtime ended in frustration, and bedtime often stretched into long hours of calming and reassurance. Each night, the father lay awake, thinking of ways to make things right. To restore the stability and joy that had once filled their days, it was during one of these restless nights that he met someone who would change the course of their fight. A retired Army veteran named Daniel had recently moved into the neighborhood and volunteered at the center. Daniel had a reputation for being calm, observant, and fair. When the father first spoke with him about the situation, Daniel listened without interruption. He didn't offer immediate solutions. The way he paid attention made the father feel like someone truly understood the struggle. Daniel was no stranger to challenges. Years in the military had taught him patience, strategic thinking, and the importance of standing up for what was right. He saw the injustice in the caregiver being fired and the effect it had on the boy. He understood the quiet, persistent struggle of a parent trying to protect their child. Without hesitation, he offered to help, saying that together they could make a case that would be hard to ignore. The first step was observation. Daniel spent time at the center, quietly watching the boy, noting the progress he had made, and documenting the challenges that arose in the caregiver's absence. He spoke with other parents and staff members, gathering anecdotes, details, and observations. Every small story, every note of progress, became part of a growing record that showed the true value of her presence together. The father and Daniel created a detailed journal. They included descriptions of tasks the boy could now perform, words he could express, and behaviors that reflected the lessons and patience of the caregiver. They added notes from therapists and other staff who had witnessed the caregiver's dedication. It was a careful, methodical process. Every piece of evidence was meant to demonstrate the tangible difference she had made in the boy's life at home. The boy's behavior slowly became the measure of their work. He still struggled, but the small victories became signs of hope. He tried to hum the songs she had taught him, stack blocks in the order she had shown him, and repeat the exercises she had practiced with him. It was clear that her influence had been lasting, even if her physical presence was gone. These moments strengthened the father's resolve, showing him that the fight was not in vain. Daniel suggested reaching out to other parents at the center. They began talking quietly, sharing experiences, and discovering that many families had noticed her exceptional dedication. Parents spoke of their own children's progress, the patience she had shown, and the ways she had made the center a nurturing place. Slowly, support began to build, not just for the boy, but for the caregiver who had been dismissed unfairly. With the evidence collected and the support growing, Daniel advised the father to approach the center formally. They requested a meeting with management, presenting the documented progress, testimonials, and the observations of both parents and staff. They approached the meeting calmly but firmly, emphasizing the real impact the caregiver had made on the children, especially the boy, and highlighting the consequences of her absence. The administration listened, but it was clear they were hesitant. Policies and procedures were cited again. Special treatment, favoritism, and consistency were the reasons they initially gave for the termination. The father felt frustration rising, but Daniel reminded him to stay calm, to present facts without emotion. They needed to be persuasive, but not confrontational. The stakes were high, and any misstep could cost them the chance to bring her back. In the days that followed, they continued building momentum. Local community members were quietly informed. Their parents shared their experiences, and the father and Daniel prepared additional documentation. Each effort was aimed at showing that this was not about one child receiving special attention, but about a caregiver whose dedication positively affected everyone she worked with. It was about fairness, compassion, and the well-being of the children. Meanwhile, the boy's life remained unsettled. He faced confusion, anxiety, and frustration daily. He sometimes asked for the caregiver with gestures, pointing to the empty spaces where she had been, or repeating songs she had taught him. The father responded with patience, using familiar routines and comfort strategies. But he knew nothing could fully replace the care and guidance she had provided. Each setback was a reminder of the urgency of their mission. As their campaign gained traction, Daniel suggested using a public appeal, carefully framed to avoid controversy but to demonstrate the collective support for the caregiver. They shared stories of her patience, dedication, and the tangible impact she had made. They highlighted the boy's progress as a direct result of her presence, showing that fairness and compassion should guide decisions, not rigid policies alone. The father found strength in these efforts. Each parent who spoke up, each testimonial they gathered, and each small sign of his son's progress reminded him why this fight mattered. He realized that advocacy wasn't just about one individual. It was about protecting children, supporting caregivers, and ensuring that acts of kindness and dedication were valued. It was about building a community where compassion was recognized. Every day brought new challenges, but also new hope. Slowly, momentum built. The administration began to see the growing support and the undeniable evidence of the caregiver's impact. They could not ignore the testimonies, the documentation, or the community concern. The father and Daniel continued their efforts, meeting with parents, staff, and even local advocates who understood the importance of what was happening. The boy, in his own way, showed resilience. Even in moments of frustration, small signs of progress reminded the father that the caregiver's lessons were lasting. He would attempt new words, try new activities, and occasionally smile with a spark that reminded his father of the happier days. These moments were precious, and he shared them with Daniel, using them to reinforce the argument for reinstating the caregiver. As weeks passed, the pressure on the administration increased. They were faced not only with evidence and testimonials, but with a growing sense that fairness and community support demanded action. Daniel advised patience, strategy, and clear communication. They continued to gather details, refine arguments, and present their case in the most compelling way possible. The father found himself learning a lot about advocacy, strategy, and persistence. He discovered strength he hadn't known he possessed. The fight was not easy, but it was necessary. He understood that standing up for his son and the caregiver required courage, patience, and careful planning. Each step forward was a victory, even if small, and he celebrated them quietly. Knowing the bigger goal was still ahead at home, the boy slowly adjusted to the ongoing uncertainty. He responded to the father's calm, consistency, and encouragement. They created small routines that mirrored what the caregiver had established, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy and security. These routines were a lifeline, both for the boy and for the father. As they navigated the emotional turbulence together, Daniel's presence became invaluable. He offered not just guidance, but reassurance. He reminded the father that persistence, patience, and careful strategy would make a difference. He reminded him to focus on facts, evidence, and community support, rather than frustration and fear. Together, they built a plan that felt thoughtful, structured, and humane. One afternoon, after gathering another set of testimonials from parents who had witnessed the caregiver's dedication, Daniel and the father sat quietly, reviewing their materials. The father realized just how much progress they had made. The documentation was strong, the support evident, and the message clear. The caregiver had been unfairly dismissed, and the children were worse off because of it. It became clear that change was possible. The father's determination, combined with Daniel's experience and strategy, had created a movement that could not be ignored. The evidence, the stories, and the community's support formed a compelling narrative that demonstrated the value of compassion, patience, and dedication in childcare as they prepared for the next step. The father reflected on the journey so far. The struggle had been exhausting, frustrating, and at times heartbreaking. But it had also been a journey of growth, understanding, and connection. He had learned to advocate, to observe, and to fight for what was right, not just for his son, but for the principle of fairness and recognition of true care. The boy, in his own way, continued to show resilience. Every small step, every attempt at communication, and every moment of engagement was a reminder that their efforts were not in vain. The father held on to these moments as proof that the caregiver's influence had been profound and lasting. Each sign of progress fueled their determination and strengthened their resolve. Together, the father and Daniel planned the next phase. They would meet with the administration again, armed with evidence, testimonials, and community support. They would present their case calmly, firmly, and respectfully, showing that the decision to fire the caregiver had consequences not just for one child, but for the community, the center. And the principles of compassion and dedication, the journey was far from over, but hope had returned. They had allies, evidence, and a plan. They had each other, and they had the unwavering belief that standing up for what was right, for what mattered, could make a difference. And in that belief, they found the courage to continue, ready to face the challenges ahead with patience, determination, and a deep commitment to justice and care. The day they decided to confront the administration arrived, and both the father and Daniel felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. Months of preparation, documentation, and quiet advocacy had led to this moment. They entered the center together, carrying folders filled with progress notes, testimonials, and observations from parents and staff. The father felt the weight of the boy's struggles in his chest, a constant reminder of why this confrontation was necessary. As they were led into the meeting room, the administration greeted them with polite but cautious expressions. The father could sense hesitation in their demeanor. They were used to routine, to policies, and to decisions made without questioning. But this time, the room held something different, a sense of accountability that could not be ignored. The father opened the folders and began presenting the evidence they had gathered, while Daniel spoke calmly, emphasizing the fairness and well-being of the children. They started with the boy's progress. Detailed notes showed improvements in communication, social interaction, and emotional regulation. Photographs of projects, recordings of him practicing words, and observations from therapists clearly demonstrated that these milestones were achieved under the guidance of the caregiver. Each point was presented factually, without embellishment, letting the evidence speak for itself. Next, they shared testimonials from other parents. Stories poured in about how the caregiver had gone above and beyond, not only helping their children academically, but also creating a safe and nurturing environment. Parents spoke of her patience, understanding, and ability to recognize the unique needs of each child. These personal accounts added weight to the argument, showing that the decision to terminate her had repercussions beyond one child. Daniel then spoke about the importance of consistency and emotional security for children, especially those with unique needs. He explained that disrupting a child's routine could have lasting effects, and that the caregiver had provided more than instruction. She had provided stability, trust, and guidance. His military background gave him credibility, and his calm, clear delivery made the points impossible to dismiss lightly. The administration listened, occasionally interjecting with reminders about policies and protocol. But the father and Daniel had anticipated this. They acknowledged the importance of rules, but emphasized that policies should not come at the expense of the children's well-being. They argued that compassion, dedication, and the measurable impact on the children were equally important considerations. As the meeting progressed, the administration became more attentive. They asked questions, requested clarification, and examined the evidence. The father could feel a shift in the room. What had started as a routine discussion was now turning into a serious evaluation of the decision to terminate the caregiver. Each photograph, note, and testimonial reinforced the argument, making it increasingly difficult for the administration to stand by their original decision. Outside the meeting room, other parents and community members began to gather quietly. Word had spread about the father's efforts, and many wanted to show their support. They understood that this was not just about one caregiver, but about the principle of valuing dedication, compassion, and the well-being of children. Their presence added quiet pressure, signaling that the community was invested in the outcome. Back in the meeting, the father and Daniel continued presenting examples of the caregiver's influence. They described how the boy had learned to express his needs, how he had begun to trust others, and how small victories became sources of confidence and independence. They painted a picture of a child whose life had been transformed, and they made it clear that her absence was causing setbacks that could not be ignored. Daniel emphasized that the caregiver's dedication had ripple effects beyond the boy alone. Other children benefited from her patience, guidance, and ability to create a calm, nurturing environment. It was a lesson in how one person's care could change an entire classroom dynamic, improve morale, and set a standard for excellence. The administration could no longer argue that her presence was simply a personal preference. It had a measurable impact on the community she served. The father, speaking from the heart, described the emotional toll the firing had taken. He shared moments of frustration, sleepless nights, and the boy's visible distress. He explained that the caregiver had been more than a teacher or aide. She had been a source of security, trust, and guidance that no policy could replicate. He reminded the administration that decisions affecting children should be rooted in empathy and understanding. It's not just rules and procedures. As the discussion continued, the administration began to shift. They asked for more details, requested to speak with other parents, and even reviewed past evaluations that showed the caregiver's exceptional performance. The evidence was overwhelming, and their initial stance began to crumble. It became clear that they had underestimated the community's support and the impact of the caregiver's dedication. After hours of discussion, Daniel suggested a break. The father stepped outside, feeling a mix of anxiety and hope. Parents waiting quietly in the hall offered smiles of encouragement, reinforcing that he was not alone in this fight. The sense of solidarity was comforting and empowering, showing that advocacy could create real change when guided by compassion and reason. Returning to the meeting, they resumed with a focus on solutions. The father and Daniel proposed reinstating the caregiver with clear guidelines that balanced adherence to policy with the acknowledgement of her essential role. They emphasized the importance of supporting her work, recognizing her contributions, and ensuring that children like the boy would continue to receive the guidance they needed. The administration deliberated, weighing the evidence, testimonials, and community support against their initial concerns. They recognized that the caregiver's impact was undeniable, and that failing to act could have consequences for the children, the center, and the community. Slowly, they began to acknowledge the need for a fair resolution that considered both policy and the well-being of the children. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the decision was made. The caregiver would be reinstated, and steps would be taken to ensure her work was supported and recognized. The father felt a wave of relief and gratitude. Months of preparation, advocacy, and perseverance had paid off. His son's stability and progress could now continue, and the caregiver's dedication was acknowledged and valued. The boy, unaware of the specifics of the meeting, began to notice familiar routines returning. He smiled at small victories, hummed the songs he had learned, and began to show signs of the confidence and trust that had flourished under her guidance. The father watched with a mixture of pride and relief, knowing that the battle had been won not just for the caregiver, but for his son and the principle of compassion in action. Outside the meeting, parents and community members celebrated quietly, acknowledging that their voices and support had played a role in restoring justice. The father and Daniel reflected on the journey, realizing that standing up for what was right, even against bureaucratic resistance, could create meaningful change. It was a lesson in perseverance, empathy, and the power of collective advocacy. The caregiver returned to her role with renewed energy and dedication. She was met with gratitude, support, and respect from both the father and the community. The boy, once again, thrived under her guidance, showing remarkable progress and confidence. The father felt a profound sense of relief, knowing that the right person was back in the role where they could make the greatest impact. The experience left a lasting impression on everyone involved. The father learned the importance of persistence, strategy, and community support. Daniel saw the power of advocacy grounded in facts, empathy, and fairness. Parents witnessed the impact of standing up for what mattered, and the caregiver received the recognition she deserved. Together, They had proven that dedication and compassion could triumph over rigid policies when guided by evidence, support, and determination. In the days that followed, routines returned to normal, but the lessons remained. The father continued to support his son with confidence, knowing that the caregiver's influence was secure. The community remained engaged, reminding the center that compassion, dedication, and the well-being of children should always be at the forefront of decision-making. And the boy, once again, flourished in an environment where patience, understanding, and care were not just ideals, but daily practice. Through the struggle, the father realized that advocacy was not a single action, but a continuous effort. It required observation, documentation, strategy, and, above all, empathy. Standing up for his son and the caregiver had strengthened his resolve and deepened his understanding of what it meant to protect, nurture, and fight for the ones he loved. And in that understanding, he found a renewed sense of hope, knowing that justice, compassion, and dedication could prevail when people chose to act with courage and care. With the caregiver reinstated, a sense of relief settled over the father and his son. It felt like a heavy storm had passed, leaving clear skies in its wake. Life began to regain its rhythm, but this time, it was richer, filled with lessons about persistence, community, and the power of care. Every morning now carried the promise of new discoveries and small triumphs. The boy's laughter returned, his confidence blossomed, and the father felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in months. The caregiver returned with quiet strength, greeted with gratitude by the father and warm smiles from the children. She had endured the uncertainty with patience, and now her presence restored stability and familiarity. The boy's eyes lit up the moment he saw her, and he reached for her hand, a small gesture of trust that spoke volumes. Watching them together, the father realized how much she had shaped his son's growth, not just academically, but emotionally, socially, and personally. Daily routines regained their structure. Mornings became calm and organized, with breakfast followed by playful learning sessions that encouraged curiosity and creativity. The caregiver had a natural way of engaging each child, turning challenges into opportunities for growth. She encouraged the boy to express himself, try new things, and explore his abilities without fear of failure. Every small achievement became a shared celebration, reinforcing confidence and building resilience. At home, the changes were equally profound. The boy began to communicate more effectively, sharing his thoughts and feelings in ways that had been nearly impossible during the caregiver's absence. The father observed with pride as his son attempted new words, completed tasks independently, and showed empathy toward others. These milestones were no longer fleeting moments. They were becoming the foundation of a brighter, more confident future. The father also noticed his own growth. The struggle to advocate for the caregiver had taught him patience, strategic thinking, and the importance of community support. He had learned to navigate difficult conversations, present evidence calmly, and rely on allies when the stakes were high. These skills not only helped him secure the caregiver's return, but also strengthened his ability to support his son and manage daily challenges with renewed confidence. The bond between father and son deepened as well. Shared experiences, moments of understanding, and the mutual recognition of progress created a stronger connection. The father found joy in witnessing his son's achievements, and the boy in turn sensed the stability and support that surrounded him. Together, they celebrated each milestone, no matter how small, reinforcing a sense of accomplishment and mutual trust. The caregiver's dedication extended beyond the boy alone. She continued to provide individualized attention to all the children, creating an environment where each child felt seen, valued, and supported. Her patience and insight inspired other staff members, setting an example of excellence and compassion that influenced the entire center. Parents began to recognize the positive impact of her presence, fostering a community of support and shared responsibility for the well-being of the children. The father took time to express his gratitude. He thanked the caregiver not just for her work with his son, but for the way she had restored hope, confidence, and trust in a system that had seemed indifferent. Her unwavering commitment had transformed their lives, and he made sure she knew the depth of his appreciation. These expressions of gratitude strengthened their relationship, building a foundation of respect and mutual understanding that extended beyond professional boundaries. Community support continued to play a role in the ongoing success of the center. Parents, inspired by the father's advocacy, became more involved, sharing their experiences, volunteering, and providing feedback. This engagement created a collaborative atmosphere where children's needs were prioritized. Caregivers were recognized for their dedication. The father observed the positive ripple effects, understanding that standing up for one person had the power to improve the entire environment. The boy's progress was remarkable. He began participating in group activities with confidence, forming friendships, and expressing his creativity through art, music, and play. Social interactions, once challenging and stressful, became opportunities for learning and connection. The father marveled at the transformation, realizing that the caregiver's guidance had provided more than instruction. It had nurtured resilience, self-esteem, and a sense of belonging at home. Routines became opportunities for reinforcement and connection. The father incorporated strategies from the caregiver into daily life, using positive reinforcement, structured play, and patient guidance to support his son's continued development. Mealtime, playtime, and bedtime became predictable and comforting, fostering emotional security and stability. The boy responded positively, showing improved self-regulation, communication, and engagement. The father also took time for reflection. The journey had been challenging, filled with uncertainty, frustration, and emotional strain. But it had also been a period of growth, learning, and connection. He recognized the importance of perseverance, advocacy, and community in achieving positive outcomes. The experience had strengthened his resolve to support his son, to value caregivers, and to prioritize empathy and understanding in every decision. The caregiver's return also inspired other children to thrive. Her patient, individualized approach encouraged curiosity, creativity, and collaboration. Children learned to express themselves, solve problems, and interact with confidence. The father observed these changes, recognizing that her impact extended far beyond his own family. Her dedication had created a positive, nurturing environment that benefited all who were part of it. Over time, the father noticed that the boy was more resilient in facing challenges. Setbacks no longer caused prolonged frustration or anxiety. He began to explore new activities, attempt tasks independently, and express his needs more clearly. These developments were a testament to the caregiver's consistent guidance and the stability restored by her return. The father felt a profound sense of relief and pride. Knowing that his son had regained the confidence and support necessary for growth, the community celebrated small victories together. Parents shared successes, teachers recognized progress, and children thrived in a supportive, encouraging environment. The father felt a deep sense of connection to the community, understanding that collective effort and advocacy had created meaningful change. He realized that standing up for what was right not only benefited his son and the caregiver, but also strengthened the bonds and trust within the entire community. The father also took time to mentor others, sharing his experiences with parents facing similar challenges. He spoke about the importance of observation, documentation, advocacy, and collaboration. His story became an example of how persistence, empathy, and strategic action could lead to positive outcomes. By helping others navigate difficult situations, he reinforced the values of community support and the importance of valuing caregivers. As months passed, academic, social, and emotional milestones were reached with consistency and joy. The father observed his son's growing independence, self-confidence, and engagement with the world around him. The caregiver's presence remained a cornerstone of this progress. Her patient guidance and compassionate approach shaping every aspect of his development. The father also learned to appreciate the importance of balance. While advocacy and support were essential, creating a nurturing home environment, fostering emotional connection, and celebrating small victories were equally important. He developed routines that emphasized patience, positive reinforcement and consistent guidance. These practices reinforced the lessons taught by the caregiver, ensuring that progress continued both at home and at the center. The caregiver's influence extended beyond professional duties. She shared insights, strategies, and encouragement with the father, creating a partnership that enhanced the boy's growth. This collaboration strengthened their understanding of his needs, facilitated consistent guidance, and fostered a supportive environment. The father felt grateful for her expertise, dedication, and the deep compassion she brought to every interaction. Through this experience, the father realized the importance of standing up for what matters. Advocacy, community support, and perseverance had restored stability and trust, benefiting not only his son, but also the caregiver and the larger community. He recognized that courage, empathy, and careful action could create meaningful change. Even in the face of bureaucratic obstacles, the boy's transformation became a source of inspiration for others. Teachers, parents, and community members witnessed the power of consistent, compassionate care. His achievements highlighted the importance of valuing caregivers, prioritizing children's well-being, and fostering supportive environments. The father took pride in the collective effort that had led to this positive outcome. As the story concluded, life felt richer and fuller. The father, his son, and the caregiver had weathered uncertainty, adversity, and frustration. Yet through patience, persistence, and compassion, they had emerged stronger, more connected, and more resilient. The father watched his son laugh, play, and learn with confidence, knowing that the caregiver's return had made all the difference. The community remained engaged and supportive, recognizing the lessons learned. Parents advocated for children, teachers valued dedication, and the center embraced a culture of empathy and understanding. The father felt a profound sense of gratitude, knowing that standing up for what was right had led to lasting, meaningful change. The journey had been challenging, but the outcome was a triumph of perseverance, love, and the power of human connection. In the quiet moments at home, the father reflected on the journey. He saw the growth, resilience, and happiness of his son and recognized the profound impact of the caregiver's presence. The struggle,